Okay, let's talk about Zeri, the elephant in the room, the biggest winner after the crit item buffs. Or is that true? Well, as a matter of fact, high elo Zeri mains are sporting incredible win rates right now, some of them even getting as much as 90%, which is much higher than the win rates of one tricks for most other champions. By the way, if you want to check these players and their profiles for yourself to study, you'll find a link in the description. But here's the crazy part. The crit item buffs, namely to Infinity Edge, Quick Blades and Last Whisper items, were mostly placebo buffs. Well, to be fair, the Last Whisper buffs are quite huge, but Quick Blades and Infinity Edge are not all that much better than before. What these buffs did do, however, was remind people of how strong many crit marksmen actually have been all along, and Zeri is a prime example. Her naturally high mobility and great scaling fit the meta very nicely, since you are deceptively hard to catch even for assassins, while also having natural synergy with defensive runes and items. You'll see what I mean in a second, because in this video I will show you the most successful strategies used by those high elo Zeri mains, which includes optimal rune and item choices, but also of course real in-game examples. And once you've seen Zeri's game plan in action, it should be quite straightforward for you to emulate. But just in case it isn't as straightforward for you as you hoped, or if you just want to see guaranteed fast results in your solo queue climb, I can connect you with a private challenger coach thanks to my sponsor Solo Queue Solution. As with every skill you might want to learn in life, there is nothing more efficient than a private teacher, and the coaches from the coaching company Solo Queue Solution already have crazy results under their belts. We are talking about consistently turning students who were hard stuck silver for years into diamond players. Yes, they do that routinely, and they do it by using their knowledge to pinpoint exactly the areas in which you can improve the most as a player. You know, because League of Legends is so complicated, most people can't even tell why they are hard stuck, and this is where the challenger coach is a literal game changer. Of course, climbing from hard stuck silver to diamond is only possible if you are serious about the game as well. But if you love playing solo queue and manage to play at least 15 hours per week, you are an ideal candidate for the Coaching to Diamond program. You'll find everything you need, including a link where you can book your first session, in the description. But enough advertising, here's Zeri's optimal rune page, which you can just copy straight away. You go for Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Legend Alacrity and Last Stand, with Conditioning and Overgrowth secondary. Lethal Tempo is a no-brainer for Zeri. The champion is all about scaling into the late game and all about longer teamfights because of her ultimates. Your ultimate rewards you for sticking to targets in longer fights, auto-attacking them with your Q over and over again, and Lethal Tempo stacks at the same time, so there's a natural synergy and your damage will just go through the roof. Now Zeri actually doesn't like building a lot of lifesteal despite being in longer fights quite often, so Triumph is actually very important so you can keep going even during those longer fights where you take a lot of damage back. Now, in order to circumvent that lifesteal problem, you could go for Legend Bloodline in the next row, but all of the high elo Zeri mains are choosing Legend Alacrity. The rune's front-loaded properties especially make your lane phase a little less punishable, which can go a long way if you want to ensure your scaling. At the same time, the rune is not at all bad in the late game either, because of how Zeri works with bonus attack speed. Now in the last slots, most champions pick Coup de Grace, but Zeri is actually a good user of Last Stand. Zeri can only function in teamfights if she's able to run down the opponent, which naturally means you will take some damage back because you can't really kite beyond your auto-attack range or else your ultimate would expire. Last Stand, however, allows you to turn the damage you take into bonus damage you deal yourself, which is a natural combo. Now for that reason, Zeri does not go for offensive runes in the secondary path, instead you want Conditioning and Overgrowth. Yes, both of these runes do nothing in the lane phase and Zeri is quite vulnerable in lane, but they do so much later on. The defensive stats from these two runes is very crucial later on, because the counterplay to Zeri's playstyle is to just one-shot her, and these two runes are anti-one-shot runes. I cannot stress this enough, you want fights to go long. Now pretty much all high elo Zeri mains agree on this rune page, it is optimal. But the item build is a little different, here you have to choose what suits you better. Well, first of all, as you know, Zeri is all about scaling, which is why you start with Kal, not with Doran's Blade. This naturally has implications for how you play the lane, which you will see during the analysis part. In any case, there are two core builds you can use on Zeri, and here they are. The first one, which I personally like a little better, is you rush Berserker's Greaves, then Static Shiv, and then you go for a Zeal item, either Phantom Dancer or Hurricane. This build gives you extreme kiting and chasing abilities with sheer movement speed, and also sets you up for an Infinity Edge late game. Yes, the Infinity Edge buff was smaller than expected, but it's still there, and it's quite nice for this build. The alternative, however, would be to go Berserker's Greaves and Static Shiv as before, but then go for Quick Blades. Without a Zeal item you have less movement speed, but Quick Blades makes up for that because you get more access to your dash. Both of these playstyles center around kiting, while still being slightly different. Make no mistake, both of them work very well, and you can just choose what suits you better. However, what they do have in common is that they both rush boots and they both use static shiv. Getting boots fast is very important because you want them as soon as you reach level 6 for the level 6 power spike with movement speed. And static shiv is just a top tier AD carry item in general because it builds out of Noon Quiver while also giving you wave clear, which is very important on Zeri. Now in the late game you have multiple item options. There is the pure offensive path of Bloodthirster, Lord Dominic's Regards or Mortar Reminder. Well, you could argue that Bloodthirster is a semi-defensive item, but it's still rather an offensive one because it gives you so much AD, but you could label it as semi-defensive if you like to. The true semi-defensive choices, however, are Shield Bow, Guardian Angel, Black Cleaver, Morthmal Mortius, and Mercurial Scimitar. All of these items are quite nice in the right matchups, allowing you to itemize against enemy burst damage while also not really forfeiting your own damage output, but keep in mind, this is so important, you have to be able to stay alive even in the face of a fed offensive enemy, because if you get one shot, you cannot follow your game plan. In very specific matchups, you can even go for full defense with Randian's Omen or Spirit Visage. Yes, these are more niche options, but they do have their place. If the enemy team is for example full AD with a Yasuo mid and a Zed jungle or what have you, Randian's Omen can really shut them down. But I assume you get the idea by now, so let's jump right into the analysis. In lane, Zeri is notably weak, a feature that gets even more prominent if you pair her with a weak lane support such as Yuumi. As a consequence, you need to play a rather passive lane phase, prioritizing farm while avoiding enemy poke damage and especially engage spells. This is definitely one of the most stressful aspects of playing Zeri, but when you choose to play a late game hypercarry, you just have to bite the bullet here and try to ensure that you can scale as safely as possible. At this stage, it is very important that you hold onto your mobility spell at all times, so you have it ready as an escape tool should the enemy create an opening. You must stay out of trouble for now, and should you greedily use your dash offensively, you will pay a big price. Keep in mind that Zeri's lane is even weaker than you might expect because you start with Kull, not Doran's Blade. Therefore, your only reliable play in lane is to farm your minions under tower, then push the stacked wave into the enemy tower, and then repeat as the tower resets the wave to push against you again. It is completely reasonable to expect that especially good enemy players will punish you for being passive like this, which will result in a slight level NCS disadvantage. However, none of this matters in the long run since you outscale them so hard. And the precise point where your scaling starts to matter is your level 6 power spike, but only if you already picked up tier 2 boots. Remember, your ultimate is nothing without movement speed. While not being able to save the dragon here, Zeri was still able to force out a response from the enemy while ultimately trading 1 for 1, a trade that always favors the scaling champion. Especially for Zeri, the faster you get your static shiv power spike as well, the better, since wave clear doesn't merely give you lane priority, but crucially makes fighting much easier. No minions means no way for the enemy to block your bullets. Anyway, Zeri is not designed to win lane, and in most cases this will result in you losing your bot lane tower. If at the same time your teammates are also not having the greatest game, this can get quite disheartening. But when you play a late game hypercarry, you must have the mental fortitude to resist tilt. If that's not you, you should rather play an early game champ. However, Zeri's catch and chase potential in the mid game is quite nasty and gets better and better as the game progresses. This is also where you should in fact start using your dash offensively. People in solo queue greedily overextend all the time, and your ability to pop out of walls is an excellent way of taking advantage of such greed. This is also why Zeri, unlike most ADC champions, actually enjoys fights in closed jungle terrain. All the choke points that are normally a death trap for the as a whole largely immobile marksman class, present easy entry and exit points for Zeri. The walls just increase your kiting ability significantly, as you can use them as a line of defense when an enemy tries to get on top of you. As you just saw, even if you get caught in the end, by the time the enemy manages to get a hold of you, you will already have caused so much disruption that your team can convert the map pressure into progress with ease. And this example right here demonstrates this quite impressively too. Just watch how Zeri's mobility allows you to toy with the enemy while they cannot ever just approach the objective.
A summoner has disconnected.
Tahm Kench even popped his ghost, but catching a Zeri in the jungle is near impossible when you use your dash correctly. You can always escape near the wall, the enemy will have to jump through giant hoops to get to you, which most of the time is just not happening. And with Baron buff, Zeri's team is now able to crack open the entire enemy mid lane, 3 towers and inhibitor, effectively nullifying any advantage the enemy got off of Zeri's weak lane phase. In the very late game, more and more fights will take place in lanes you need to push, so you get less jungle terrain to work with. However, now your items and runes give you the survivability and movement speed Zeri needs to force her ideal scenarios, long-lasting teamfights allowing you to take full advantage of your ultimate and lethal tempo. But of course, in order to get to this fun part of playing Zeri, you must nail how to play the lane phase. So check out my AD Carry lane phase guide as well by clicking the link on your screen.